Complicated Creation by Elemental. Chapter 5. You don't have to do it alone. Izuku's never done this before, and he's scared down to his bones. He'd been so stupid to bring Eraserhead through, but there'd been no other choice. He'd reached out because if Eraserhead died in front of him, it'd be his fault when he could have done something earlier, and now... Calm down. Tamamono Mei's voice soothes him while he channels her power. He could not do this on his own, but then neither could she. Her powers have nothing to do with healing, and none of his borrowed favors would be enough to put Eraserhead back together again, looking like he does, like a shattered porcelain doll. Instead, they work together. The sigils for healing and mending on Eraserhead's shoulder, hands, and shins all glow as green and white lightning crackles around Izuku and into the pro hero. It probably isn't particularly comfortable for him, but the man doesn't do anything but grit his teeth, so Izuku has to do the same, even as the power feels like it burns for a moment before it begins to fade. The sigils, written in his own blood because he has nothing else to write with, and he'd read that doing it with someone else's was a very bad idea, begin to turn to dust and disappear, task complete. Eraserhead's breathing stops sounding quite so wet and harsh, and his eyes close, but it looks like more from relief and exhaustion, not that he's quite passed out. Izuku sits back on his heels and looks to Tamamono Mei with gratitude, watches as her own glow begins to fade, and Izuku realizes with growing horror, one of her tails is bright, bright white, entirely light. It glows even as the rest of her returns to normal, and he watches transfixed as it begins to disappear entirely, simply fading from tip to base. It's all his fault! He falls in front of her, hands and forehead in the grass as he kneels, breathless and shocked and overwhelmed. He doesn't have words. There are no words for the power she'd given up, given willingly, given more than he'd ever seen another spirit give anyone for no clear return. Even when Eraserhead dies, she won't get that returned, and Izuku can't give her even a fraction of it. What if she expects him to? What if... He feels her cold nose against his cheek. None of that, she scolds, voice gentle. I made my choice, and there is still work to be done. I cannot help him home. You must be the one to guide him. I don't understand, he admits, though he brings his head up as she nudges him again. You... Not all spirits are like young Kit, even if you have met a few like me. I know there is a value in saving what can be saved. Power will always return, eventually. He shakes his head. He hasn't met anyone like her, ever. But she nudges him again with her cold nose, and he remembers. Erase your head! The man is trying, and failing, to sit up under his own power. Izuku hurries to his side and helps him, while the kitsune settles behind the man, supporting his back. Don't rush it, Izuku warns him as Eraserhead groans. You were really hurt. It's going to take a minute. Good, he says, sounding better already, and he fixes Izuku with an attempt at a narrowed glare. Then can we take that time for you to explain to me what the hell is going on? Oh! Izuku has to admit this is probably a lot for the hero to deal with, and he hadn't given him any warning at all. Of course, this would be really overwhelming. It had been almost too much when he'd come through the first time. He feels his cheeks heat up, but tries not to flail because he needs to tell Eraserhead everything important, everything he needs to know. He's dreamed about this happening for years, being able to show someone, being able to tell someone, and now that it's happened, he'd never really been quite prepared for this. And somehow Izuku realizes Eraserhead is watching him quietly and waiting for him to speak. He takes a breath and tries to think in terms of priorities. Okay, what did he have to learn the hard way? This isn't home. That's obvious, but good to reaffirm. This is where magic lives, and almost everything here has some magic or power, and that means there are rules. Really, really important rules that if you don't follow things, worse than death will happen, and I don't know if I'll be able to save you from them, right? Right. He doesn't let the hero interrupt, just presses on, feeling vaguely like he's running downhill. Rule 1. Your name is Eraserhead. Never tell anyone anything else, no matter what they say or ask or offer you, just erase your head. Don't touch anything, or take anything, or talk to anyone unless I say you can. Tamamo no may clears her throat. Or your spirit does. She's okay, but no one else is. Don't make any promises, don't agree to anything, don't take anything you're offered unless one of us says it's okay. He has to take a breath. Somehow, Eraserhead doesn't interrupt him, and Izuku takes that as a tiny blessing to continue. Rule 2. Stay with me. This place can change around you if you're not careful, or if you step wrong, and if I lose you, I may not be able to get back to you in time. You're going to have to let me guide you to get home, but I promise I will. And, Rule 3. You can't lie here. Izuku swallows a rather very sharp lump in his throat. I can't lie here. No one can lie, which doesn't mean they can't trick you. But if you need to test that out, you should get it over and done with now, because I need you to understand that I'm telling the truth, even if it seems crazy and impossible. And I need you to not try to lie to me, because I really, really don't think I'm going to be able to handle that right now, okay? He's had time to think about what happened, and he can accept it, but if the hero tries to do anything even now, Izuku just doesn't know. In the following silence, Eraserhead blinks, his flat expression just that. Izuku can't tell if he doesn't believe him, or if he still thinks he's crazy despite everything, or if maybe being brought here and getting banged up and then getting healed has just fried the hero's brain a bit. Hopefully not the last one. If he's given Eraserhead brain damage, he'll be the worst, the absolute worst. They'll never forgive him. You're rambling, Eraserhead says quietly. And I don't have brain damage, but thanks for worrying. Are you done? I think those are the most important things to know right this minute, Izuku offers, knowing he's missing so much, but they have to start with the basics. I'm sorry, I didn't really ever plan for what would really happen if I brought someone through. Eraserhead blinks again like that's a weird answer. Why? Why? Izuku fists his hands in the grass but doesn't pull. Because it's dangerous? I mean, really, really dangerous? You're not supposed to be here. You're really not supposed to be here, and when they find out, some of them are going to come after us. Who are they? My kind, Tamamo no Mae says, and Eraserhead startles ever so slightly. We might find humans of much use, but we do not welcome them into our world lightly. We're going to have a conversation about your kind in a minute. The hero promises like a threat, seeming to take his spirit's explanation in stride. But one step at a time. Why can Deku come in? Because he is not human, Tamamo no Mae says when Izuku feels his throat close up. Not the way you are, not entirely. And he is likewise not entirely welcome. He is tolerated. Barely. Izuku croaks and stares at his dirty shoes and dust-caked jeans. It takes a lot to come in and out, and it's always a risk. So I only do it if I don't have another choice. Like when you left the station. Eraserhead says. It isn't a question. Izuku's fingers find the hole in the side of his shoe and prodded his foot through it. I really don't want to talk about that right now. All right. Izuku stares up at Eraserhead, who seems to be thinking about everything, but not judging. I have a lot more questions, but we were in a fight, and I left two heroes to deal with a villain with an explosion quirk. How do we get back? Izuku winces at that. I can't just take you back there. I'm a hero, kid. I know the rest. No, I mean I can't, he says again. Literally. I basically pulverized you to get you through to here in the first place, like forcing you through the eye of a needle, and I burned a lot of power to do it. The only reason you're alive is because your spirit helped me heal you, and even if I could push you back through the barrier, you'd end up the same way or worse, and I wouldn't be able to do anything out there. I can get us home, but we need to find a weak point. Eraserhead frowns, his already thin lips disappearing. What does that mean? We have to move. I don't know where we are right now. This is an area I've never been to. So we have to get somewhere familiar before I can get us to a place where the barrier between there and here isn't as strong. Usually that means there's a shrine on the other side, and I can hopefully help you through from there. If we're lucky, there will be one close to Minami. And if we're not lucky? Then we keep looking. Izuku swallows and erases its glare. If we just take the first one that shows up, we could end up in America! Or France! I ended up somewhere in South America once in a rainforest. Usually, though, I'm pretty good at staying in Japan. Eraserhead closes his eyes, and Izuku worries as the man sighs, raises his hand, and covers his face. How is this my life? He mutters, and Izuku has never felt a more kindred spirit in a set of 4 words before. I don't know if it helps, but I ask myself the same thing every day. The look Eraserhead gives him between his fingers says it doesn't help, but Izuku feels better anyway. The police have Demolition in custody and the fires are all out thanks to the kid and Karada's quirk, but Tsuji cannot relax. Karada's gaseous form collects in front of him, slowly solidifying. I've checked through all of the rubble. There's no trace of him besides his scarf. Her skin glows with the sheen of sweat of her exertion, and she sways ever so slightly, but she stands tall. I think we need to consider that the kid made him disappear. Tsuji nods. Eraser had mentioned the teleportation quirk, but it is best to rule out anything else, with the most of us momentarily blinded. Karada's expression is worried. That's what bugs me. He and Eraserhead are gone, which makes sense for teleportation, but he had a water quirk. A good one. He put out the fires around us when I tried to get him out. There might be someone we missed who helped him out. Tsuji feels uncertain. I do recall that Eraserhead asked us to not engage because he had a teleportation quirk. He did not wish to spook him. He can remember that clearly, in fact. Karada curses suddenly and reaches for her phone. Multiple quirks and a kid that Eraserhead was interested in, of course! Tsuji doesn't know what she's talking about at first until he listens in to recall. Hello, Tsukiji! She says, almost too bright, too sharp, and Tsuji realizes this is Karada worried. I think we have a lead on that Deku kid, but there's a problem! So, Shota begins as he follows Deku through this cotton candy nightmare of a lucid dream. Spirits. Magic. You were telling the truth back at the station. The truth, or somehow Shota had found himself involved in a very, very elaborate sort of brainwashing, and he just can't bring himself to think that is the case. Everything is too real. Deku is too earnest. It makes several pieces of the puzzle this kid had given him make a warped sort of sense. Yeah. Deku glances over his shoulder briefly, expression twisted, unaware of Shota's internal monologue. Sorry. And seriously, what the hell? You're apologizing for telling the truth. That's new. No! Deku shakes his head. For dragging you into this. Because now you know, and I thought it'd be good if someone did, but now you're here and in danger and it won't even matter in the end. Shota wants to find every adult who'd ever interacted with this kid in his life and just shake them until their teeth rattle! Even if that means doing it to himself, what the fuck is even going on in Deku's head? Shota wants to know, but he's got to do this right this time. If he scares him off again, something tells him it'll be for good, and damn it, but they need him! Not sure I follow your logic, he says, making himself sound as non-judgmental as possible. Why won't it matter? Deku's hands go into the pockets of his hoodie, which is in sorry shape as it is. Every line of his tiny frame reads defeat as they walk through an impossible reality that this kid has apparently lived for years. I didn't think about it before, not properly, until the thing at the station. When I tried to tell everyone then, I realized after that, I realized that it doesn't matter. Still not following. Shota keeps his hands in his own pockets and his voice as teacher as he can make it. Next to him is his spirit guardian fox thing, and every so often it gives him a look. But he's only human, and they've got to take this one damn thing at a time or he will have an honest-to-God meltdown. Because it doesn't change anything. Deku says explosively, turning to face him, his expression tortured. Because knowing doesn't change anything for you or for anyone else. And it just means they won't believe you either. And if you argue it, they'll call you crazy and take away your hero license. Because knowing will make a difference. You can't stop them, or talk to them, or hear them, or affect them in any meaningful way. No one can. So telling people is pointless. The kid is breathing hard, his shoulders so hunched they're up around his earlobes, and his whole body radiating tension and self-hate, and probably, if Shota had to guess, some fear. He might have to upgrade shaking the adults in this kid's life to punching.
You've clearly thought this one out.
He looks down at Deku through the fall of his hair.
Shame you missed a point.
Deku gapes it in like a fish. Eyes wide, mouth open, lips flapping. It's the most childlike thing he's seen this kid do, and Shota is instantly relieved to see he can do it at all. What?
Makes a difference to me.
Shota shrugs, makes sure he doesn't put too much pressure on the kid, and looks around at this absolutely impossible world that makes his eyes hurt every time he tries to focus on something for too long.
I know now, and I believe you. I'm sorry I did it before. And you know what? Even if no one else ever knows or believes, you know, and I know. And that's better than dealing with all of this on your own, isn't it?
He looks back at the kid in time to see the naked longing there. And then Deku turns away and starts walking faster than before, his whole body canted forward like he's hugging himself. We shouldn't stay still for too long, he says abruptly, but Shota can hear how thick his voice is. Everyone will worry about where you've gone. Shota follows not quite beside the kid, giving him enough space without leaving the vague radius Deku had announced was safe to move in around him. Beside them, the kitsune moves, dropping back to brush against Deku for a moment, and then touches a cold nose to Shota's wrist. Thank you, she says, and Shota somehow understands that he can hear her and Deku can't. He has been afraid for a very long time. You will be good for him. Shota doesn't know how to reply to her in kind, so he just shrugs and keeps going. It's no good to let the kid dwell, and he seems more than capable of tugging his ear off if given an opportunity.
How about you tell me about the spirits then, properly this time?
He asks, hiding a smile as Deku nearly trips over nothing in surprise.
I remember you talking about them affecting quirks, but the details are a bit hazy. I was pretty tired that night.
He's pleased with that. It is no lie. The details of Deku's crazy at the time claims had it been important enough to expressly memorize, and he had been tired. 2 statements, both true. He'd already figured out that any actual lie would twist in his mouth and physically hurt, just as Deku had warned him. Not that he wants to lie to this kid, but he needs to know how this place works. Right! Deku settles down a bit at that, relieved to have a shifted topic away from him. Okay, well, how should I start? Generally, one starts at the beginning, Tamamo Mae suggests, flicking her tails so that they brush the top of Deku's head, and he ducks with the tiniest smile. Her voice is lilting and rich, and Shota thinks it is about as far from his own voice as one could get. I will begin. Once we were worshipped. And it makes sense, Shota admits to himself, as the spirit explains with Deku's interjections. At least it makes sense as long as you accept the existence of magic as a truth from the start, which he's working on. Humankind's evolution into quirks has always been a contentious one, with theories spanning everything from a virus carried by mice to direct meddling from underground scientists to aliens and everything in between. One of the major reasons no cohesive theory ever really worked was because of just how varied quirks were and continue to become. Evolution struggled to explain how one person grew wings, while another could psychically manipulate blood, while a third could simply negate gravity. There was a lot of pushback against actual genetic research as well, which Shota was on the fence about. On one hand, a better understanding of quirks was, in broad strokes, a good thing, just like any other facet of humanity's health and well-being. On the other hand, quirk research was the most abused of the sciences, and genetic manipulation had such a bloody history, it was very nearly outlawed around the world, and what was allowed was, in theory, closely monitored. And yet things like the Nomu had still come into existence. Still, as Shota listens, things make more sense than they don't, which also makes the "this is all a dream" hope all the more fleeting. Humanity's mutation wasn't for quirks, Deku and the Kitsune propose. It was something that allowed spirits, or whatever these creatures were anyway, to bond with humans and share some of their power. It's definitely a symbiotic relationship, but what kind really depends on how you look at it. I mean, they mostly don't care what you do with their power or how it manifests, or if it's dangerous. They just want you to use it to make it stronger, so that when you die and the power returns to them, they become stronger and they can just repeat the cycle. Deku's really engaged now, though Shota notices how his eyes never stop roving around them, constantly aware of their surroundings like he's waiting for an attack. So for some people, it's parasitic. Some spirits are awful and they'll give too much power to someone or something really destructive because they want to see them cause harm and use their power a bunch and they don't care about the costs to the human. But then you have someone who can change their eye color or turn everything they touch orange, and I classify that as a commensal relationship because they're not getting anything out of it except a quirk in a society that really doesn't like it if you don't have one. Shota doesn't interrupt, and he barely lets himself breathe. This is the sort of analysis he'd expect in an essay from one of his third years at minimum. Not an off-the-cusp oral presentation given by an almost assuredly homeless kid with more issues than Shota has fingers. And then there's people like All Might, or you, or other pro-heroes, or even villains, where it's mutualistic. You benefit and your spirit benefits, even if you're not aware that they're even there in the first place, and they don't really care what you do with their power exactly. Deku gestures around them at the pastel trees and the blue-green grass and the seemingly never-ending empty gray-pink horizon. I think it might be a problem in the future if the spirits keep getting stronger and keep putting the same amount or more of their power into humans. I used to study heroes. He pauses, and for a moment his bright exuberance is shuttered as he looks anywhere but near Shota. When I was a kid, I wanted to be one, and I noticed then that the heroes now were stronger than the heroes before them, and then watching the sports festival every year, you can see the students are getting stronger too. He bites his lip and looks up at Shota almost apologetically. I don't know what that will mean, though.
Not your problem to solve,
Shota tells him firmly. This kid is not responsible for the whole goddamn world, even if he thinks he is.
And speaking of when you were a kid, are you really 16?
Deku sighs dejected. I know I'm short. Shota resists the urge to curse. The kid looks like he's been malnourished for years.
You're more than short, kid. Look.
He sees how Deku flinches and he eases his voice quickly.
I'm not angry, I promise, but I'm going to ask you something. You don't have to answer, but I'd really like you to, if you can. How long have you been living on your own?
Deku closes up. Shota watches as he drags his eyes away and his shoulders go back up and his hands are jammed back into that god-awful hoodie. The kid tries to say something. Shota suspects it's a lie by the way his mouth twists and he gags for a second. They walk in silence and he gives Deku the time to think about how he wants to answer. My mom died when I was 11. Deku's words are so quiet, Shota can barely hear them, even in the surreal silence that surrounds them. There was an attack, some villain gang, and it tore through our neighborhood. There's no way. This kid has been on his own for 5 years. Shota begs the universe at large. Out loud, he simply says,
I'm sorry.
Deku shrugs with one shoulder. She was the only person who believed me. Even if she didn't understand, even though she couldn't see, she let me. He shakes his head and seems to change what he wants to say. She helped me figure out what to do to keep them from coming after me. They would come in while I was sleeping and try to hurt me, especially after I was 8. Another pause, another ragged breath. I was put in care, social services. They tried, but I was quirkless. And even after I was in a group home, they thought I was making things up, that I wanted attention because I didn't have a quirk. And Shota can see it, everything the kid doesn't spell out. The world isn't kind to the quirkless at the best of times.
Couldn't you pull the disappearing trick on them? Or if you stopped Shinso's quirk, that would have proved...
Deku spins on his heel. You don't understand! He snaps angrily. I had a toe joint! They know I did! It was in my file. The doctors all said I was quirkless. If you have a joint, you don't have a quirk, and I didn't know how. I don't know how to get here. I didn't know how to leave then. Someone had to teach me, and I wasn't going to be a monster no matter what anyone said, no matter what they did to me. Deku's voice crunches and he wrenches his hand from his pocket and holds it out. The hand that had seemed to burn, Shota remembers in the station. It's covered in scars. I don't have a quirk, but I can take their power if I want to. If I hurt them, if I take their names, I can make them mine. And it's wrong. His voice cracks on the last word, twisted and hurting. That's why I don't have a quirk. Because I won't take one, even though I could. Because no one wants to be my partner. No one wants to be mine. I scare them, and I should. Because if I get angry or scared, I hurt them, even though it isn't their fault. Deku's whole body flinches away when Shota kneels and wraps him in a hug. But before Shota can think, I'll fuck this up again. Deku was clinging to him so desperately and sobbing huge, gut-wrenching sobs, his whole weight against Shota's frame. He holds on to this damn child like his life depends on it and lets him cry and promises that he's safe now. Damn it, and damn everyone who'd hurt him! The fox, Tamamo no Mei, stands off to the side. He's pretty sure she's keeping guard. He's certain she approves. Izuku's horrifically embarrassed when he finally gets hold of himself. He wipes his face on his sleeve and pries himself away from Eraserhead's arms. Sorry, he apologizes, feeling like a dried-out husk and wishing he had something to drink.
Don't know anything you should be apologizing for, problem child.
Eraserhead allows him to pull away, and they both get to their feet a little unsteadily.
Sounds like you've been carrying too much on your own for too long. Part of that is my fault. I'm sorry about Shinso. Again.
Izuku shakes his head emphatically because he's had a lot of time to think about this. You didn't know I'd panic. You didn't know how bad that would be. You didn't believe me, and of course you try your best to find things out. Tamamo no Mei told me later that you told him only to ask my name, and normal people don't have panic attacks about their name.
Problem child.
Something tugs at the back of his mind as Eraserhead looks down at him.
You weren't panicking about your name.
Izuku forgets about the tug as Eraserhead says point blank,
You've been mind control before.
Izuku flails a bit. It's not... I mean, yes, I have, but it wasn't just that. It was... Well...
I'm not going to judge you.
Eraserhead says so plainly, and Izuku is struck dumb because he can't lie here. Eraserhead waits, and Izuku shifts from foot to foot for a moment before Tamamo no Mei comes up behind him and nudges him with her nose. Tell him, she says, and it's so gentle. They've both been so kind to him, and somehow it seems to be because they want to, not because they want something from him. And maybe if Eraserhead pushed, he'd close up and change the subject, but Eraserhead waits, and he listens, and Izuku feels the words come so easily, like a dam breaking all over again. The home wouldn't let me keep words up, so sometimes the spirits would bully me. They'd push me or bite or scratch because they knew I'd let them. And so I'd always be pretty banged up, and the kids thought I was doing it on purpose. So they'd do things and I tried to stop them, but then I'd get in trouble for fighting. And it was always me against them, and everyone in charge said it was my fault. Izuku rolls up his sleeves. He's got scars of all sizes along his arms that he tries to keep covered now. But he shows one arm to Eraserhead and turns it so that he can point out the 3 thin marks that run halfway up the pale skin of his forearm. When this happened, they thought I did it to myself, and I couldn't really convince them otherwise. He might have tried, but the spirits around him all ran away before he could consider breaking his promise. So they said I was at risk, and, if people think that, they could put you in a hospital and no one ever has to let you out again. He can hear Eraserhead take a breath, but he has to keep going, has to get it out. There, it was pills and nurses and doctors with quirks, and they decided I was sick, that the spirits were just something wrong with my brain, and that they could fix me. I mean, they tested everything. They showed me my x-rays. They showed me how no one with a toe joint has a quirk. Not ever. They gave me quirk suppressants and put me in cuffs to prove it was all in my head. And when I didn't get better, they got angry that I wasn't trying. Eraserhead looks unhappy. Izuku is pretty sure it's about what happened, at least not at him.
They put you in a psych ward and didn't believe your quirk.
It's not really a question when he says it that way. It's not a quirk, Izuku reminds him, tired to the bone. If all quirks are spirits and I don't have one, and everything that stops quirks doesn't work on me, I'm pretty sure we can't call it something else, right? Anyway, he presses on. They didn't let me have wards either, and with the pills and their quirks, I couldn't think, not properly. Everything started to get fuzzy, except I kept getting hurt, but I couldn't stop it. Stop the spirits from prodding me, and it was getting worse. So then one day, one of the old ones, he might be the very oldest, I don't know, but he offered to get me out for a price.
Kid.
Eraserhead sounds worried.
What sort of things do spirits want to be paid in?
Well, at least he won't be completely surprising the man if he's got an idea that spirits can't be paid in money. Izuku knows his grin probably isn't all that reassuring, but he's learned it's better to laugh than cry about this sort of thing. Spirits mostly want power, but some are collectors, kind of. And I'm limited in what power I can give them, but anything of mine has power, so I've traded things like the color purple, and what Mom smelled like, and spicy food, and the first time I ate ice cream. The girls wanted something more than that, though.
You traded your name.
Izuku's not expecting that, but maybe he should have. Eraserhead is one of the smartest heroes he knows, and he probably made it obvious. That's why I can't say it. I can think it, but I can't. It's not mine anymore. I think even if you knew it, you couldn't use it, but I don't know how it all works. They tried to use it to control me for a while. Eraserhead nods like he's taking this seriously, and Izuku can't believe this is real. That he has someone who can see and can believe, and it means more than he will probably ever manage to say.
Is that why you warned me about my name here?
He nods. Names mean a lot of things, especially for spirits. A name can tell you about them, where they're from and what they can do, and even what they're like sometimes. But they also are what a spirit is in a lot of ways. They're made up of belief, and that starts when they're named, when they become something specific instead of something in general. Like the wind is just the wind, but the west wind is a pretty nice guy, all things considered. Because the Greeks worshipped him a long time ago, so now he's like a spirit. Spirit, because he's not ready to introduce Eraserhead to gods yet. There's a pause as Eraserhead frowns and looks around them, like he's taking stock.
So, if someone has your name, they can control you.
He'll never, ever forget how it felt to be bidden and to have no real ability to disobey. At least not at first. They tried. I mean, they did control me. It had been terrifying to be commanded and puppeted. But then they wanted me to use my power against other spirits, and I didn't want to, so I tried to stop, and when they tried to force me, I figured out I didn't have to listen to them, even if they had my name. I think maybe it wasn't my full name. Spiritual names are always 4 parts, and I only had 2, so maybe that was it. He still doesn't know. It isn't like he can ask his mother or father if they'd given him a name not on his birth certificate. But it meant I could fight back, and I won.
Won how?
Izuku's relieved that Eraserhead isn't asking for more details because he really doesn't want to get into that right now. There's something comfortable about the way the man asks things to... He doesn't sound like he's judging or disbelieving or upset. He's just curious. Izuku feels like he's uncovered a dam inside of him, one that wants to pour itself out straight from his heart. I broke free and, well, we pretty much agreed to leave each other alone now. I don't want to fight them, and they have my name. And even if they can't make me do things, it's still power, and I think I might have made them, well, a lot stronger. It probably wasn't what they wanted from our trade, but it's what they asked for, and I guess I learned a lot from it. Izuku looks at Tamamo no Mae and around them. Like how to come here? Getting home took something else entirely, but he's been depressing enough for one day. And we should probably keep moving. I think we're near an edge.
An edge?
Eraserhead looks, but the landscape probably seems endless to him.
Is that a way home?
It'll get us closer. Izuku nods and reaches out to take the hero's hand. The rules of this place are weird. It's not like a planet where everything is one connected piece. It's a lot of different spaces that sort of bunch up against each other. Like if the tectonic plates all had individual personalities, sometimes played tricks on you, and moved in four-dimensional space. Eraserhead gives him a look he absolutely cannot read.
How long did it take you to learn all of this?
Oh, right. He sounds like a walking Wikipedia entry, doesn't he? There's a library here, Izuku explains, walking forward and feeling for the edge and overlap that hovers nearby, but is always an inexact science. I think I spent about 6 months there, but I don't really have a good idea of when I left the hospital exactly. But when I came back, it was spring, and I missed winter completely. Whatever Eraserhead wants to say is cut off as Izuku tightens his grip on his hand, and they move from one place to the next in the space of a step. Hisashi knows not to wait by the phone. Even though they don't have a landline at all, he and Shota and Hitoshi use their cell phones like sane people who want a phone they can put on silent or vibrate and can screen their calls and receive texts. Look, Hisashi thinks landlines are a relic and they remind him too much of work at the station, so there isn't exactly a phone to wait by at all. Having your cell in your pocket doesn't count. He's still waiting though, and trying not to. Shota hasn't checked in, and it's not something to panic about. Being an underground hero means your schedule can sometimes be a bit out there. But it's something to worry a bit about, because being an underground hero means that if he hasn't heard from Shota in X amount of time that they've set up in advance, he's allowed to get worried. This time, Shota's following up on something to do with the Yakuza raid, and the cops have had the lead on it. So at least he isn't the one in charge of sounding the alarm if Shota doesn't get back to him. It'll mean he hasn't gotten hold of the police either. Still, he's had to sound more alarms than he'd like since they graduated. The point is, Shota's missed his first call, but not his second, and Hisashi is worried but not letting it show because he doesn't want to upset Hitoshi, who is far too smart about this sort of thing.
Something's burning,
Hitoshi warns as he enters the kitchen and heads straight for the coffee maker. Ah! Hisashi pulls open the fish oven and is relieved to see tonight's dinner is a bit black, but not actually black yet. Don't worry! Still totally edible! He assures, lifting it from the grill and setting it on a plate with a pinch of extra salt. Probably should have added more water to the pan, but it's fine! And what are you doing drinking coffee this late at night?
Is decaf.
Hitoshi sets the table and keeps glancing over his shoulder at Hisashi.
You know you do this every time.
Don't mind!
Make shioyaki and pretend everything's fine.
Hitoshi sits next to him once the table is set and they both begin on their meal.
Did Dad not call?
Hisashi stares at his son, but he hasn't won a single staring match in this household, and Hitoshi isn't about to let him do so now. Am I that obvious?
There's a reason you're not an underground hero,
is his reply, but it's said with what, for Hitoshi, is fondness.
You're really obvious when you're worried.
Only because you live with me! Hisashi feels the need to defend his hero cred. He can't have his kid thinking he's not capable. You've learned all my tells! You know what my weakness is! You're perfectly primed to undercut me at every turn!
And you're being dramatic.
His son smiles, propping his head up on one hand, elbow braced on the table.
Can you tell me anything about it?
Hisashi considers that for a moment and then nods. The basics that they'd pass along to any hero is safe enough for Hitoshi. He knows the value of a secret. He's out that Minami Ward! The one with all the creepy plants! They think one of the Yakuza bigwigs that took the raid is hiding there! He's there with some quieter heroes because the area is still a bit rocky, and the civilians aren't too happy about heroes, since we didn't exactly do a stellar job out there. So the cops didn't want to send anyone too flashy.
In other words, Endeavor would just upset everyone.
Hisashi snorts, trying to hide it, and failing. Why doesn't he? He'd probably try to burn the plants even after every brief, saying they're basically fireproof, and then spread their pollen everywhere in the process. We've been trying to cut back immortal thorn bushes for years. The description knows its job. Shinzo laughs.
Well, lucky for us, Dad's handling it then. Hopefully he'll call soon. He warned you he'd cut off your feet if you placed another hole in the rock.
For the last time! Hisashi, righteous, bangs his fist on the table. That was a candle!
Sure.
Hitoshi eyes him over his mug and is absolutely laughing at him silently, which Shota totally taught him. And it's so not fair. His kid can be silently smacking him, and Hisashi can't ever get it back.
If that helps you sleep at night.
His phone rings before Hisashi can figure out the perfect rebuttal, and he recognizes the detective's number in his caller ID. He tries to keep a smile on his face, but he's pretty sure it's a horrible grimace based on the way Hitoshi seems to focus on him. Present Mike! He greets and hopes like hell this is a courtesy call.
Hello, Mike,
says Tsukauchi, sounding grave. That voice is never good. Hisashi knows. He feels his chest go tight.
There's been an incident with Eraserhead's current mission. I wanted to give you an update.
By the time the call is done, Hisashi can't pretend to smile anymore. He sets his phone down and just buries his face in his hands because this is the nightmare. This is one out of 2 bad dreams that keeps him up at night, that follows at the heels of every mission Shota takes, that threatens every time the phone rings and Shota isn't here. Hitoshi is beside him with a cup of tea and he presses it into his hands.
I heard some of that,
he admits, but it's no surprise. Hisashi has to keep the volume on his phone up to hear things after all.
Dad's been kidnapped?
Maybe not. Hisashi holds the cup and doesn't drink anything, but the heat in his hands feels good, grounding. Hitoshi just pulls his chair closer so he can sit with his knees very nearly against Hisashi's. During the fight, he was hurt. You remember the kid, Deku?
He'd be hard to forget,
is Hitoshi's deadpan reply. Right, well, that makes sense. They think they ran into him while looking for the villain. Demolition. They don't think they were working together, but Shota got hurt. The words feel so wrong to say. Shota got hurt and Deku, they're pretty sure he teleported him away. No one got a good look at it though because there was an explosion right after, so he might have been helping, but... Hitoshi nods.
But they don't know where he is, and he hasn't called.
Hisashi nods. He hasn't contacted anyone, and no one has any idea where Shota might be because no one's seen Deku since he disappeared. Ashtray takes that moment to jump on the table and empathy fish. You brat, no! Hisashi and Hitoshi both reach for her at the same time, and Hitoshi ends up cuddling her to his chest. I swear she gets worse every time, he grumbles.
Dad's been sneaking her treats when he thinks we're not looking.
What? Hitoshi smiles. Well, it's a smirk, it doesn't reach his eyes.
Make that when he thinks I'm not looking. You're clearly not paying enough attention at all.
Hisashi's brothers.
What are they going to do?
His son. There, son. Asks, still holding Ashtray, and maybe she knows because he curls against him and purrs and doesn't fight to get away.
How are they going to find him?
Tsukauchi is going to call in everyone he can. Hisashi can report that much at least. They'll find him, Hitoshi. His son nods once, face half hidden by cat.
They will, or he'll find us.
He repeats back with all the conviction he can muster. Hisashi knows they're both trying to convince one another. Maybe if they keep repeating it, it'll be true.